Good morning, Year 9. So, first of all, congratulations for finishing all those Richard III videos that I made for you. Hope you enjoyed them. It's been good getting a bit of feedback about how people thought they went. I'd not done anything like that before, so that was my kind of personal challenge through lockdown to try and do something, to try and take my normal lessons using that film and to make it accessible and kind of usable without me being there to help you through it. Now we're going to move on today and for the rest of the term onto kind of a more kind of intense, kind of detailed study of Shakespeare, the play and the different characters. And starting today, we're going to be looking at the use of language. Essentially, that is the most important point of any Shakespeare study. Is once you've got the plot and the characters sorted, which we have now from watching the film, to move into the language. So that's what we're looking at today, and for the rest of this week. There are going to be kind of three things that we're going to look at this week. So not just today, but this is the overall what we're doing this week. We're going to be looking at the way the reason that language is used, and the kind of the purpose that language has. So that's the first reason. The second reason is we're going to be looking at the way the language is used in terms of patterns and structure. So what does Shakespeare do with the language that kind of repeats? What kind of patterns are there, and how's it all put together? And the third thing we'll be doing this week is looking at the power of individual words and expressions. Okay, so that's the overview for this week's learning. Today's focus is the reason that language is used and its purpose at different points. And to start us off, this is the notes that I want you to kind of take on board today. Characters use language for all sorts of reasons, and understanding a character's motive is vital if you want to understand the play as a whole. For example, Richard uses it to deceive. To make it seem that he doesn't want to be king, when offered the crown, he says, "I am unfit for state and majesty." And that's from Act 3, Scene 7. So, the reason why we need to understand the language and the reason it's being used, the purpose it has, is it gives us insight into a character's motive. And once we've got our heads around what the character's trying to achieve, that will help us to understand the play as a whole. Okay, so that's why we're doing this. And hopefully the example that I've put here for you makes that nice and clear. Okay, there's the character, that's the purpose. What's his motive? He doesn't want it to look like he's king, and that's the example that he's using. So your task today, Year 9, is kind of explained below. On this slide and the following slides, there are three columns. The central column contains quotations from the play and examples of Shakespeare's language, and that's this one here in the orangey yellow. And there, underneath it, is the quotation or the example of the language. In the left-hand column, the reason for the language is shown. So here you see it in the green, the reason for use, and here's the purpose, the reason for that language. And in the right-hand column, I'm going to use purple. I'll go to blue, it might be better. In the right column is the person who says the words and what the words mean. So there in the blue is that heading, and here is the kind of answer. So your task today will be to complete these columns. Now, I'll be giving you the quotes in the central column. You'll have those ready for you, but the left and right hand columns will need to be completed. Okay, so that's your task, is to basically fill in the gaps in the column. So here we are, start off with. So the first thing is to look at is what is being said. Okay, so what is said? And the first quote is from Act 1, Scene 2. And the character, in this case, I've given you that, it's Anne. It's Richard talking to Anne. So this is Richard's lines. This is what he says. "Your beauty was the cause of that effect. Your beauty that did haunt me in my sleep, to undertake the death of all the world, so I might live 1 hour in your sweet bosom. And as I've put on the side here, to make it nice and clear for you, Richard speaking to Anne, explaining why he killed her husband-to-be and her father-in-law. Your task is to work out what is the reason for saying these words. What's he trying to achieve? What's his motive? The second one is Act 4, Scene 4, so it's much later in the play. And you need to, I'm not going to tell you this time, who's speaking and which character says these words. The liquid drops of tears that you have shed shall come again, transformed to orient pearl, advantaging their love with interest of 10 times double gain of happiness. So, your task here is to work out who says these words and what the words mean, and also what is the motive, what's the reason for saying these words. Now, in the Google Classroom assignment, I'll post a link to a No Fear Shakespeare website, which does do translations. Okay, so all you need to do is to go into that website, follow the link in the Google Classroom assignment, and find Act 4, Scene 4, and then scroll through the pages until you find this particular quotation. And then if you really don't know what the words mean, you can find it there. Alternatively, you can try and work out what the words mean. But these words were said in the video, in one of the videos, so hopefully you'll remember them. Let's move on. So we've now got Act 5, Scene 3. There's that third one today. The sun will not be seen today. The sky doth frown and lower upon our army. I would these dewy tears were from the ground, not shine today. Why, what is that to me? Now, this quotation was not in the film version. It was cut out. So that's why I've told you here who says it, and it's Richard. And what he's doing is he's describing the weather before the battle. So your first job is really to explain what these words mean. As he describes the weather, what type of weather is he describing? And then what's the reason for things? What's the motive? What's the thought process behind these words? What's going on in his head when he says these words? We're going right back to the beginning now for this fourth one. Act 1, Scene 1. Hopefully you'll remember who says these. Since I cannot prove a lover to entertain these fair, well-spoken days, I am determined to prove a villain. There's a bit of a clue there with that last word. Who says these words and what is their meaning? And finally, what is the reason for saying these? Why tell this to the audience? And finally, your last part of today's lesson is Act 4, Scene 2. Again, this is in the film, so hopefully you'll recognise who says this. And is it thus? Repays he my deep service with such contempt? Made I him king for this? I suppose that's the big clue. That part. Who is that person who made him king for this? So who says these words and what do they mean? Finally, what is the reason? What's going on in the character's mind? What's the emotions? What's the motive behind these words? So that's today's lesson, folks. So your task is to obviously go through and to complete the orange and blue boxes on this sheet. So as you complete your work, you could just go through. I think there's 5 altogether. So just do quote 1, and then fill it, and then right next to quote, just write the word quote 1, and then right next to it, reason for use and who says it, what it means. I'll try and make it into a kind of a Google Doc for you to work with as well, either to print off or to actually write straight onto. All right. So I hope if this is all fine. Any problems, as always, just send me an email or a comment on the Google Classroom, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Take care, folks. See you soon.